Tracks Ahead, brought to you by the Model Railroad Industry Association, helping hobbyists design and build their own miniature railroad empires, inside or outside, big or small. Kato, manufacturer of precision railroad models, and the Unit Track system.
Hi, I'm Spencer Christian. On this episode of Tracks Ahead, we'll look at the history of the company that built almost all of the interurban cars in the U.S. We'll look in on a radio-controlled garden railroad and then visit a museum in the Green Hills of Kentucky. But first, we're going to the Outback of Australia as we work our way from the harsh desert of Alice Springs to the Green Hills of Adelaide. Of course, we'll travel by train on the Ghan.
Through the core of Australia's red centre runs a train, the Ghan. It's called this desolate country home since the 1920s, and its history is close to the hearts of Australians.
Oh, I love the Ghan.
It is the way to travel through the rough middle of this vast land.
Irene had the idea that this would be one of the best ways to see the Outback, right up close and personal. And it is, it's great.
It's like a legend, you know, it is a legend.
The legendary Ghan runs between Melbourne and Alice Springs. In a country of contrasts, it would be hard to find two more different spots on the map. Melbourne is the second largest city in Australia. It's a bustling place complete with its own local trains and metropolitan flair. Alice Springs seems a world away. It's got the feel of an outpost in the middle of the Outback, but there is something special about Alice.
There's something about Alice that is, oh, I don't know. As soon as you come through that gap, there's a beauty about it.
Many begin their journey a bit further north, deeper, closer to the equator. They come for the rock.
If it wasn't for the rock, no one would go there.
Right. It's the main attraction, of course, and you hear about it, but you actually have to see it to really appreciate it. And it's huge, and it's something everybody should have the experience of seeing, I believe.
Ayers Rock, or Uluru as it's known by its Aboriginal name, is the reason most people come to this area. In fact, there are so many visitors that what you might expect to be an awe-inspiring experience cloaked in natural silence is often filled instead with the clamor of restless, anxious tourists. But the experience is unforgettable and magnificent.
Phenomenal.
Oh, yeah, when you see pictures of the rock, you know, it's okay, but when you get up close to it, that is awesome. And we went out to see the rock at sunrise, so you could see the different colors, and it was awesome.
And to see that sunset, just breathtaking. They say 40 shades of green in Ireland.
Yeah.
I saw every bit that many shades of red at Ayers Rock. It's fantastic.
It is fitting that a train of legend is the preferred means to travel through this ancient, sacred land, a land that is, for the most part, virgin and unspoiled, something increasingly rare today.
One of the things we were commenting on this afternoon was that if someone from America were allowed to come over here and start developing the whole thing would be developed immediately, and you'd be seeing McDonald's and Burger King everywhere. And instead, it's just a vast, vacant land. It's amazing.
A lack of restaurants out there does not mean a lack of dining opportunities in here. In fact, just the opposite.
Oh, the food on the Ghan's beautiful.
Ladies and gentlemen, those guests travelling in our gold service section of the train, holding the sunset meal sitting reservations, could you kindly make your way to the restaurant as your dinner is now ready to be served?
We had kangaroo last night.
It's wonderful.
And we had high hopes of seeing some kangaroos, and we actually did see some.
Oh, the keeper said, I can assure you, it won't bite you, you know.
That is kangaroo, my friend.
How are you?
And that is a very, very tasty meal. So I guarantee it.
Kangaroo fillets marinated with macadamia oil and a native pepper leaf, which is found out proportionally native to Australia. That's one of the fillets there. You get one fillet per kangaroo.
I know you don't have kangaroos in America, but if you ever come to Australia, try kangaroo. It's one of our best meats.
Guaranteed.
A ride on the Ghan is more than just a trip from point A to point B. It is a combination of experiences.
It's just been such an exciting adventure. It's more than anything that I had expected to see.
Going across the Outback was very appealing because we thought we would see, you know, a very large area.
And I've never found a nasty person yet. You know, with your cases and things like that, they'll always help you. The staff's always nice.
I always am impressed by the way people come inside as total strangers, and within an hour or 2 hours they look like it's a big family, and because of that they all of a sudden get involved in all sorts of cultural changes, because it's normally there's so many different sorts of people from all sorts of places in the world.
The Ghan is an epic journey, one to think about, to save up for, and finally, to enjoy.
You know, I've spoken to an older couple only today. They have thought of this trip for the last 6 years, and and now they here. They couldn't believe it. They couldn't believe it. Wow, you know, as if they are in heaven, you know, sort of thing. The next good thing to happen.
And the only thing is, I'm in a single room at the moment, and it's not meant for big ladies. Little ladies, yes, but not big ladies.
There is always room on the Ghan, room for everyone. And if it ever does get a bit snug inside, there is another world outside, as open and limitless as your imagination. The Outback seems a place without bounds. The Ghan is your point of entry.
The Ghan is planning on a future extension all the way to Darwin on the north coast. If you're fortunate enough to be truly good at just one thing in life, you really do feel blessed. But if you're into garden railroading, being good at one thing just isn't enough. Not only do you have to know model railroading, you have to be an expert gardener as well. Out in Maryland, we met one of the best.
This railroad is a work of art. A work of art in the making for the past 20 years. Jim Strong is the artist. Strong is a self-made model railroader, as well as an amateur landscape architect. But looking at this layout, maybe amateur is the wrong word. Expert might be a better choice. His woodland railway is not only large, but also absolutely fascinating to look at. Altogether, it probably measures out at about 150 feet by 150 feet. It's laid out in two main sections. There's the section that was built in the woods behind his house. That came first. A few years later, the side yard portion was added.
Once I did get some track down, then I started thinking about, well, what do I want to put around it? And so as time went on, first of all, I was getting plants, and I killed plenty of them, trying to get them to grow in the shade. But eventually, I found the ones that would survive. They didn't have to grow, they just had to survive. And that's where we got to the yews and the little cedar trees you see here and things like that. I found moss that grows really well here and does a good job of keeping erosion down. And I found the plants. And then to keep it sort of, I always wanted to keep an eastern flavor to it. So that's why I went to the kind of rocks I have here, rather than yellow or red rocks that are typical of the West. So these are basically Pennsylvania fieldstone, which, you know, come from Pennsylvania. I would guess that I've used about, 3 or 4 or 5 tons of rocks so far.
Some of the same things that make Jim Strong's layout so impressive are the suggestions he would offer to anyone considering such an undertaking. Make sure you have a strong theme. The railroad has got to be as much fun to look at as it is to operate. Different things can help accomplish this. Make sure there's a certain amount of visual isolation in your design so that the entire railway can't all be seen at once.
And I like it where I have to walk around to see everything, just like you on the real railroad. If you flew over one in a helicopter, you couldn't see the whole line at one time. They go through trees and through mountains and things like that. So that's a kind of visual barrier that I wanted to have on the railroad. So I've planted trees for one thing, and large bushes. The trains go through around hills that I've built up out of rock and stone. They go through tunnels, anything to isolate one area from another and force you to walk around to see everything that there's there to see.
Jim suggests that a layout design be as natural as possible, just like it is in a prototype. Let it follow a natural path, and the path of least grade and least resistance. Build it like they'd build a real railroad. One thing you might want to do is build on a raised planter. It's easier to see, and it's easier on your back, not as much bending over. And when you design your layout, make sure you provide for lots of easy access, as well as operating flexibility. It's no fun if you can't get to the parts of the layout you want to work on.
I'd advise people who are starting out to start with something very small in an area that they think they might want to build their railroad in, and then expand from there. Don't try to do it all at once. Don't try to plan everything out on paper first. You might have plans on paper, but don't try to do it all at one time. You'll find that you try to build too much, you'll get frustrated, and you'll never get done. But if you have a chance to start small, you'll see what you like, you'll find out what you like, and you can go from there.
And just listening to the names of the towns here, Hemlock Hill, Tall Oaks, Willow Flats, and Woodland Junction, give you a little bit of an idea of what kind of plantings Jim likes to use.
Up in the woods, I found that yews will survive nicely. Actually, they'll grow. Then azaleas grow well in the woods. They're a shade plant. They don't necessarily bloom up there, but they do grow and survive. There's a arborvitae that seems to grow well in the shade, although most people think of them as growing strictly as sunshine plants. But it's funny, there's one that has a vertical leaf and then another one that has a horizontal leaf. And the one with the horizontal leaves, I guess that catch the sun better, do well in a partial shade. And they'll basically survive. Then there are boxwoods, American boxwood and English boxwoods that seem to do well.
On the Woodland Railway, the big details are pretty noticeable. But if you look closely, you'll see that just as much attention is paid to the little details. Realistic, real-life scenes. Social vignettes, Jim likes to call them. Just little reminders that this fantasy land is not that far from reality.
Now here's a bit of wisdom from Jim Strong. Don't get so serious about the hobby that it becomes too much work and not enough fun. Jim says too many folks take the hobby to an extreme. For many years, the PCC railcar was a staple of the interurban electric lines in America. We'll look at the company and the man behind it all in just a moment. Kentucky, home to bluegrass, thoroughbred horses, and trains. Kentucky is where we'll find the Kentucky Railroad Museum, where in addition to steam, we'll find the last of a breed of diesel locomotives.
Way back when our country fell in love with trains, this is what they looked like. And this is what they sounded like. The experience is still very much alive at the Kentucky Railway Museum here in New Haven. It's a history linked to key events in our history as a country. During the Civil War, New Haven was home to a church seized by the Confederates and used as a hospital. This rail line cut through the heart of a lot of the action during the war. The Sherwood Hotel, which sits next to the rail line, was built by Errol Johnson's grandfather in the 1870s. At the time, this was a town split by the war between the states, but also a town that managed to stay together.
Kentucky was neutral, so like my grandfather, he chose the Union side, so he had to go to Indiana to be sworn in. Mr. Hagan, his friend, all south of here, Bowling Green, all Confederate. He goes to Bowling Green, he's sworn in the Confederate Army in Bowling Green. Well, just like the picture, there's my grandfather and Mr. Hagan. My grandfather was a Union man, Mr. Hagan was a Confederate man. They're both in the same battle at Chickamauga. Mr. Hagan doesn't have a hand there, he lost a hand at the Battle of Chickamauga. They're both in the same battle. My grandfather has a crippled arm. He was wounded at the Battle of Stones River. This is an 1898 picture. After the war, they're still bosom buddies. It's like nothing never happened.
Today, it's a peaceful way to spend an afternoon. It's easy to get nostalgic about trains, and this one has a long history. On special days, you can step aboard and find all the gentility and grace of the once proud Flamingo.
The Flamingo was one of the named trains of the Louisville and Nashville Railroad, and it ran across this branch line on its way from Cincinnati down to Atlanta. The Railroad Museum here has recreated that in conjunction with a foundation in Louisville, and we have the Flamingo dining trips, and the china is the standard railroad white china. All the accoutrements, the salt and pepper shakers, the sugar bowls, the creamers, and so forth, are all logoed with the L&N logo, much as it was in the 1930s and 40s.
Out the window, you see the countryside pretty much the way it was all those years ago. The 22-mile round trip wanders through the rolling Fork River Valley.
It's great, and I like it because there's good food, and the waitresses and waiters are doing a good job. And I've never been on a train before. It's my first time, and it's great.
Out the window, it's a Kentucky where you can almost picture another era, one where this wasn't just a way to travel, but the way to travel: steam.
Steam engines are fascinating for a lot of people because they, in effect, live and breathe. When the steam engine fires up, it puffs, it huffs, much like people do. You can actually see the steam coming out of the cylinders, and it shows how the engine is working. And it has the noise to it, it has the whistle sounds. It brings back lots of memories for the older people, but for the younger people who have not grown up around steam, it still shows very much how things work and how steam locomotives work. and it's a living creature.
It lives and breathes right here for you in the heart of Kentucky.
My name is Edwin B. Meissner, Jr., and I'm retired, but I used to be president and general manager of St. Louis Car Company.
The St. Louis Car Company is the history of American streetcars. Edwin Meissner, Jr. took over after his father led the company to greatness.
I was the luckiest guy alive. You know, many of my associates that went to work for their fathers, it didn't always work out too well, but I'm just the opposite. It worked out great. He was a wonderful guy, and we got along great, and he raised me from a pup to follow in his footsteps, and I did, and I loved it. This is a PCC car. It was a new development. It became very popular in many cities, so we got a lot of orders and a lot of repeat orders. So I think the car company and the PCC car kind of go hand in hand for people that know this industry. You know, it gives you a sense of pride that equipment that we built, you know, back in the 30s and 40s is still operating. Unfortunately, not as many of them as there used to be. But we built close to 5,000 PCC cars for most of the major cities in the United States. I'm sorry to say most of them are no longer in service, but on the other end, some of them are in service by their second and third owner. And that makes you feel proud. It's good equipment, properly maintained. It can almost last forever. Well, we think it's better looking than any bus I ever saw. We think it's a classy design, and even though this thing is, well, I guess pushing 50 years old, I still think it has a classic look to it.
The creations of the St. Louis Car Company played a role all across our country. Some carried troops. Some were for personal travel with an eye toward the elaborate. But most were the workhorses of urban transportation. Whether you stepped aboard in New York or New Mexico, you stepped aboard a St. Louis car.
People think it was a streetcar shop, and it was, but it also was a very diversified factory and had many capabilities. This is a Chicago Transit Authority Rail Rapid Transit car built by St. Louis Car Company. Someone came up with the idea of salvaging components from unneeded streetcars that they wanted to take off the street and building rail rapid transit cars that they could use on their new exclusive right-of-way. So they shipped the old cars to us. They were built by our competitor Pullman, and we scrapped them, but we salvaged the trucks and I think the seats and perhaps some lights and other components, but we built brand new bodies. And then we reinstalled those expensive components. And so for all practical purposes, they had a new car, but at a lot lower cost. The sad fact is that there are really no full-blown car builders left in the United States. I mean, we were about the last to go. Our Canadian friends have an assembly plant in New York, and the Germans have an assembly plant in, I think, California, but most of the work's done overseas. It's an industry that didn't really survive in the United States. What it meant to our family, it was our life. I mean, the company was it. I was born and raised to go into it, and I did, and I loved it.
The next time you step aboard an old PCC car, remember where it was born. Remember Edwin Meissner, Jr.
You'll still find PCC cars in operation in cities around the U.S. Thanks for being with us, and please join us next time for more Tracks Ahead.
Tracks Ahead, brought to you by Kalmbach Publishing Company, bringing you Model Railroader magazine every month for over 65 years, and Garden Railways magazine, helping you take the fun of model trains outdoors. Kato, manufacturer of precision railroad models and the Unitrack system. Walthers, manufacturer and supplier of model railroading products serving the hobby since 1932. The Model Railroad Industry Association, a not-for-profit trade group for professionals in manufacturing, importing, packaging, or publishing model railroad merchandise.